Hello, everyone. A happy holiday season to you, and welcome back to Horror Convos, a very special episode in that it's the first episode of the last month of the first year of the podcast. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I want to finish off the first year of Horror Convos strong. So for this week, I apologize for the late upload. There was just a series of mishaps that resulted in me not getting this episode out to early in the day as I planned to. This is our first Horror Convos full-length commentary on a horror movie. My first sort of experiment into that territory was with the Night of the Living Dead watch party live stream, which didn't quite go the way I wanted to. The volume control wasn't where I wanted it to be, and it just didn't feel like the kind of commentary that I wanted to do. So I figured, hey, if I'm going to do this, then let's just go for it and commentate over the whole thing without, YouTube live streaming the equation altogether. So I redid the format into something a little closer to what I wanted. And this is what I came up with. So if you want to listen to the full commentary ad-free, then you know the drill. Go to patreon.com/horrorconvos, where you can apply for tier 1 membership and get access to all the content that comes out free with no commercial interruptions whatsoever, along with other exclusive content. Tier 2 membership gets you the ability to vote on what I do for exclusive content like future film commentaries. So this first title that I'll be reacting to and giving my commentary on is a little classic. You may have heard of it. Dawn of the Dead, 1978, specifically the extended edition. Then, so this one has some extra material in it. There's a few different cuts of this movie. I decided to go with the extended cut. It is. So for those of you who know where to find that, you are free to follow along with me. Once the commentary starts, I will count down to hitting play, and you are free to follow along. I decided not to chance it with showing any of the footage on the video, just because I don't want to take that kind of risk with YouTube as far as the copyright and all that. Hope that the commentary on its own is entertaining enough for you. And feel free to leave suggestions in the comments for how I can improve the experience for you. This is actually a commentary I ended up having to record twice because the first time something happened with the editing, and I don't know why the audio wasn't usable exactly, but I ended up finding this out at the last minute after I spent 2+ hours recording the damn thing, and then lo and behold, I end up having to do the whole thing over again. So that threw a monkey wrench into my plans for today. Been a very long day, and I was doing this second recording on a few hours of sleep, but thankfully I was motivated, and I still had the energy to remember most of what my thoughts were the first time, along with adding some stuff I didn't think of before. So, hope that it's fun for you, and enjoy. And here we go in 3, 2, 1, play. Yeah, I love how it starts off on that this red felt on the wall, or carpeting, whatever you would call it. It's Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, she's just like, God, she's waking up from a nightmare. Or it's just, you could also interpret it like, God, I picked the wrong time to get knocked up. But we only know what we know, and what we know is Jack and shit, and Jack left town. And we gotta act on what we know. What do we know? Wait until we know more. Here we gotta. I love how this. God, I love how this movie starts off in a news station. and like, hey, baby George Romero right there. Here, it really gives you a sense of the scale of what's going on. Whereas, Night of the Living Dead was so isolated, it could almost feel like its own little world. They'll do, like an episode of The Twilight Zone, and stretched into a feature length. This feels much more like it's becoming a worldwide phenomenon, and it almost feels like a documentary in some ways, which I think Romero said in interviews that's what he was going for. But if I had to nitpick one thing about this movie, it would be that this may have been intentional. I don't know, but the font doesn't have much character to it, in my opinion. And it just, I get that, maybe they didn't have a lot of options, especially for the low budget this movie was made on. But I don't know. I mean, some people, people who watch this movie when it first came out in theaters or grew up with it, maybe the font's more memorable to them than it is for me. Because, like, I didn't see this movie all the way through for the first time until I was in college. So it's like I was aware of it. But like I talked about in I believe it was Horror Convos episode 1, the one on Fast Zombies. It was either Fast Zombies or the first childhood trauma episode. I don't remember. But I remember seeing at least pieces of this movie. But I didn't sit down to watch through the whole thing at least until I was either out of college or in my second half of it at the time. I just love how, like, you get to see the pandemonium starting to build as the news stations are slowly losing control of their professionalism. People are trying to scramble to figure out what's going on, and they don't know. Some of them don't even know what's going to be broadcasting and what isn't, or what people or who's watching. This reminds me almost of the DVD extra featurette from the Dawn of the Dead remake, where they do the whole emergency broadcast thing, building up what's going on before the events of the movie actually start. Or to that whole emergency broadcast segment for the remake feels like a direct callback to this, in terms of trying to recreate that sense of growing unrest and just civilization holding on by a thread. But you can see now that this is really the beginning of the end. And as far as the ending of Night of the Living Dead, where you thought, oh, okay, looks like the posse's got this all under control. This should be done with in a few weeks, maybe. And then you cut to, I think this film is supposed to take place in universe, like 3 weeks after the events of, or I think like a few weeks, a month maybe after the events of Night of the Living Dead. Sure, we'll just ignore how that doesn't make a lot of sense if you look at the technology they had in 1978, from the cameras to the radios and the vehicles and stuff. The stuff in the 1968 film very much looks like the 60s. He said, but if you ignore that, then one thing I will say about this movie compared to the Zack Snyder remake is, I don't personally consider Snyder's film to be a direct remake. Like, I always considered it more of a reimagining thing, but it's really distinctive to me how this film, despite having none of the characters from Night of the Living Dead, having very loose connections to it, it feels much more like a direct follow-up, even accounting for how it came out, years later, or like a decade later, I think. Yeah, 68 to 78. So maybe from the perspective of the audience watching it in theaters, it didn't feel like a direct sequel at the time. But from my perspective, as someone who didn't grow up with this original version of the movie, you watch it back to back with Night of the Living Dead, and it very much does feel like, this is an evolution of the same situation that the last film left off on. And you really get this growing sense of urgency and dread that what previously felt like such a small world in the first film is now, very much spreading like the sickness worldwide. Yeah. Your people. Low hanging fruit with that joke. I know that. Yeah, could you be a little more subtle with that racism? Because I'm not good with nuance. Give you a sense of how not so subtle commentary on how cops are treated, and as far as the money they make for their work. Oh, yeah, I like how this movie takes place like when it's still early into the apocalypse. Oh my god, that is uh at the very least that's brown face. I don't know if it's black face. I don't know what if that guy's supposed to be dressed as like a Puerto Rican and stereotype or what. But oh my god, could you would get so much flack for that today. Yeah, so that all movies are a product of their time, for better and worse. But I tell you what really makes this one timeless is, oh my god, that dude would get canceled faster than Robert Downey Jr. if he tried to make Tropic Thunder today. But what really makes this movie timeless, I think, apart from the timelessness of the social commentary, which feels more relevant than ever today, in a post-2020 world, and that's part of what makes this pandemonium feel so realistic to me as well. It's just you look at how chaotically and stupidly we handled the 2020 incident of unspecified detail that I will not get into for reasons that have nothing to do with potential YouTube censorship or copyright strikes. Thanks. Oh, and the quarterback is toast. How many often do you hear a Die Hard reference in a horror movie? I love how the cut of that head splatter is so quick that unless you pause it frame by frame, you don't even get a sense of how fake the head looks. So, I mean, with the budget this movie had, a lot of the effects were going to have their limitations, but they were so smart in how they did so many of these that it's just like it works. Or, even the shots that they linger on, and with like that bright red paint for blood, the I don't know if they used latex or foam or what, but whatever they used for the gore effects, it's like I think it still holds up decently. As far as from a production standpoint, it's not, none of it's. I wouldn't say any of it is like 100% convincing, but like that severed hand right there, that's a pretty good looking hand. And yep. This almost reminds me of a Wreck, the original Spanish film that was remade as Quarantine, just in this apartment complex or whatever it is. That guy, that officer right there, always reminds me of Chris Rock for some reason, and I never know why. He doesn't sound like him. He doesn't look much like him in the face. He's aside from the haircut, maybe, I don't know. But it's just maybe it's the body build that they have. I don't know. He's kind of similarly thin. But God, so many people knock this movie for the zombie makeups just in terms of like this blue colored skin. If I remember, looking like Smurfs with hepatitis, if I remember right, I think Romero said that the makeups were originally green or like bluish green when they did them on set, but it was the lighting of the camera or the color filtering that made them look like this. It's no. You're blue, but I still love you. Love knows no color. Truly theirs was a love that could never be. Racist bastards. No, but I mean, like that throat chomping and the arm bite right there. Like, if you ignore the bright redness of the blood, I think those are good looking effects. You really feel the jump between 68 to 78 in terms of even accounting for how low budget this still was. They still managed to really push the envelope much further in terms of what they could do compared to how limited they were in Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, this is such a perfect entrance for how they meet each other. Yeah, I love how he shows up in that gas mask. It's just like a perfect face reveal. Yeah, I do like how this movie starts off more earlier in the apocalypse instead of doing the thing that so much zombie media, post Romero era did. Where it's like they skip over to, a few weeks after civilizations already fell. Or it's like, like with 28 Days Later, which even granted, that was still like relatively early into it. Society fell much faster in that movie's universe. But in The Walking Dead and like so many other zombie stories these days, they tend to skip over the early days of showing the downfall of the authorities and how the chaos is really getting the better of law and order, really making them feel overwhelmed. And they're gradually getting the sense as, the zombies' numbers grow more and more, or that they're just not going to be able to control this. So you see these two right here, they really have to start planning ahead before, they end up in the middle of a full-blown war zone, like dealing with all the undead that would be crowding the cities. Please lock cellar when finished. That's a perfect Night of the Living Dead reference, especially with him coming out of there. I wonder if Danny Boyle took any inspiration from Romero at all when he made 28 Days Later. Like, he insisted up and down, if I remember him right in interviews, that he wasn't setting out to make a zombie movie, at least not originally. I don't know what his mindset on the 28 Days films is now. But the scene where Jim goes into the cathedral, I think it was a cathedral, and he encounters the infected priest, and you only see his silhouette at first as he's coming out of the door, like he could, kind of jerking and raging towards him. That reminds me a lot of this scene right here with this priest or preacher, whichever he is, coming out of the doorway through the smoke. They hit you over the head with it like a sledgehammer, the message in all these movies, just like, if only just 50% or more of humanity had worked together. Yeah. This looks like another reference to Night of the Living Dead right here, like all those hands just coming through the barricade of the windows. But yeah, if I remember right, Romero said that at one point he wanted to shoot Dawn of the Dead in black and white, just like Night of the Living Dead, but for whatever reason, they changed their minds on that, and as a result, Technicolor did not do the zombies' skin makeup any favors. Because, they didn't turn out how he wanted them to look much at all. But in this film's defense, once you get used to it, if you just kind of use your own headcanon and to think that it's just a side effect of the reanimation, the germ, the virus, the rules of life and death flipping on their head, or whatever explanation you want to go with for Romero's universe. I always loved how he kept it ambiguous. See, like that makeup right there. There's a nice spectrum of, some of them have wounds, some of them look mostly normal, and I like how it adds more ambiguity to you speculating on, which of them may have died of natural causes, which ones may have had bites or wounds under their clothes that you just don't say. Yeah, but I mean, the majority of zombies, as a rule, should look zombie-like when they're close up. You got your hero zombies that are meant to be close up. They have the most effort put in their makeups. Then you got the ones in the mid-ground and the background that typically they have less and less stuff put on them as you get further back, because, realistically, you can't, do them all up from head to toe. Yeah, this scene right here, especially with the soldier coming in, and I just want to tell you both, good luck. We're all counting on you. But God, I miss Leslie Nielsen. But this right here almost reminds me of like a scene from a war documentary. It's like if you think of it like soldiers visiting a mass grave and having to put down the few stragglers inside of it that weren't quite dead yet, but they were so close to it that you're pretty much mercy killing them at that point. I can tell you, soldiers had to do that so often to so many of their friends in the Civil War. Or like, I think, if I remember right, I think I read this in a book once as a kid. The rule was like, if it was a limb, like a lost limb, they would at least try to save you more often than not. Even though a lot of deaths in that war were from amputation, but if it was a belly hit to anywhere in the torso area, then I think the rule was they had to leave you. Because they just didn't have the medical supplies or resources, especially late in the war, to really afford to even try to work on them, because like 9 out of every 10 people with belly hits were going to die before they even reached a med camp, and that's just one more body to have to deal with at that point. So, yeah, just like in a car, yeah, right? God, I tell you, someone on Capcom's dev team definitely watched Dawn of the Dead and most likely thought to themselves, hey, what would look good on Leon Kennedy? A bomber jacket. If that's what this is. I swear it looks almost exactly like Leon Kennedy's jacket from that game. I have a hard time believing that that's a coincidence, especially with how much Resident Evil as a franchise was influenced by Romero to begin with. But yeah. Yeah, I love how this story starts off from so many different vantage points. Where it's like Night of the Living Dead, you start off with Barbara and for a minute they're Johnny, and all the other characters kind of come in from, to where Barbara is. Is it like all the group kind of forms around her, as opposed to them all gathering from different origin points. Since we aren't shown all their different origin points in that film, but this one. But hey, I think that's Joe Pilato. Is that his name? That's the guy who played Captain Rhodes in Day of the Dead, isn't it? Yeah, likely story. I think that is. God, I can't believe I forgot he was in this. God, it's been longer than I thought since last time I watched this. God, I'm so good at remembering faces. You think I would have picked up on that? I swear, if that's not him, it's his twin. Yeah, I like how I'm positive that's him. God, am I the only one who thinks that he would have made a perfect Sebastian Castellanos in an Evil Within movie adaptation? if he had lived, well, one, if he had lived until, the 2010s, and two, if he were still this young by then. And that, but I'm positive that's him. There's no way that's not him. I mean, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm positive it's him. Yeah, I like how they're debating like different transportations that they want to use, as far as like, hey, do we take a car, a chopper, or a boat? They're weighing the pros and cons of everything as this goes on. Yeah. Oh, I love how they're still civil with each other, even though they were ready to chopper jack them. Yeah, it's not as easy as GTA, is it? And to say, even as early as Dawn of the Dead, they were talking about going to islands. There's some more connections to the Snyder version than people give that film credit for compared to this one. And Snyder, I think he drew enough on the source material, well, respecting the spirit of it, while still making it his own. It's very much like what John Carpenter told Rob Zombie to do with his take on Halloween. And granted, I fucking hate. Hate's a strong word. I strongly dislike almost every decision Rob Zombie made for his Halloween. But at the very least, he did exactly what Carpenter told him to do. As far as making it his own. Because, I mean, realistically, there's no way you're going to do a beat for beat or even a mildly beat for beat remake of Dawn of the Dead and outdo Romero's version. There's just no way. So it's like, if you're going to do another version at all, you may as well, try out some new ideas with it. It's a balancing act, to be sure. Yeah, sure. Two stereotypes with one stone. I mean, that may not have been intentional. Romero insisted he had no racial commentary in mind with Ben in Night of the Living Dead. I don't know if he got more of an attitude of wanting to incorporate that intentionally with Dawn and Day of the Dead. I can't say for certain, but it does feel very much so like he got more awareness of his film's impact on the topic of race relations after seeing the reception of the first film. So with Dawn and Day of the Dead, it does very much feel like he deliberately calls more attention to it. See, this is a nice juxtaposition right here. Like that shot on the hills right there. This is a nice juxtaposition between kind of looking back on the rural countryside of Night of the Living Dead. That farmhouse right there looks like it could have been just a block or so down from the farmhouse that Barbara's group was in. And so it very much looks like it takes place in the same universe, despite the technological differences. But seeing it from the vantage point of them looking down from the chopper, you can very much get it you can interpret a thematic sense of that was then, this is where we are now. Like the scale of this has really expanded beyond your little backyard in the countryside where y'all were dealing with this before. And this really feels like I wonder if any of these characters was meant or implied to be one of the same posse from Night of the Living Dead. And I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go back and rewatch the 1968 film. Which I already did that recently in my first Horror Convos live stream, which was terrible. Like I might end up deleting that. I don't even know if I'm going to leave it up. And yeah, just because that was the volume control on that thing was such shit. Always good to get a nice little practical fire effect. Just When you grow up with so much CGI fire, you really get an appreciation for the genuine article. That guy was dropping like before the gunshot sound effect even came. The guy, Figment, or a Figment's Park, whatever the name. I love this song so much. It just. I talked about this before, and I think my childhood trauma episode or the Fast Zombies episode of the podcast. Boris Karloff over here. God, it's just that music is so trippy, man. But the first time I heard it was actually in the studio logo openings for Shaun of the Dead. Like, I saw Shaun of the Dead before I saw Dawn of the Dead. I was aware of Dawn growing up, yeah, but like I said, I didn't sit down to watch the whole thing as it for years. Years after my childhood, it was grown out of. But Shaun of the Dead, by contrast, I saw that like as soon as it was available to rent. So, when I was maybe I don't know, 13, 14 at the time. No, it would have been younger than that. I mean, I started high school in 2007, so 2004 I would have been. I'm not sure I was even a teenager yet. Yeah, but yeah. Well, I was born in 1991, so 2001. Then, yeah, I was 13. I love how trippy the soundtrack is in this movie, like especially that electronic synth from Figment's Park. There's so much. It adds so much to just the surreal, uncanny, like otherworldly vibe of this movie. And it's just that's a well-timed jump scare, but it's just you really get this sense of it, even with the Technicolor. Or, it not being in black and white, you get such a strong sense that this feels almost like a Twilight Zone episode stretched into a movie, because it's hard to explain. There's just kind of a vibe to it. It's that, you don't really get in modern movies, let alone modern horror movies much anymore. God, his eyes there. Yeah. God, could you have swung a little wider? God, that was so telegraphed. A 2-year-old could have seen it coming. Yeah. Well, some people are pilots, others are fighters, others are crack shots. Everyone brings their own skills to the table. I swear, as soon, even before they land, as soon as this zombie showed up the first time I watched this, it's like I knew. Like I hadn't seen this effect before. But nice. Yeah, you could tell they were going to do something with like the top of his head. Yeah, as far as the effects go, that one definitely didn't look natural as far as looking like a real head, but it still works as a nice, gore shot. Yeah. There are some cuts of this movie where I think they show Peter, doming both the zombie kids here much more graphically. Yeah, there's like a few different cuts of this movie. I don't know which one they showed that in. But as far as zombie kids go, like nothing will ever top Zombie Vivian from the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead, and in my opinion. And I mean, I may be biased because that was my first exposure, or like the first exposure I remember to a child zombie. But yeah, I tell you, Snyder and his crew did not hold back when it comes to how they depicted her. This guy I saw I remember he was on the back of the box art, I believe, for this original Dawn of the Dead. Like I would see the VHSs of it in Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was on the back of the box. Peter! You think way too highly of me if you think for a second that I'm not going to make Family Guy jokes. Just that show has just like ruined the name Peter for me in any capacity to not reference it at least once. Ooh, you in trouble. The boy's got to learn sometime, them Franny. Needs discipline. Now imagine how scary it would be if you were black. Yeah. Yeah. Establishing that it's in Philly. I said I was sorry, man. With my eyes, I said it. I love how like insecure Steven is about his marksmanship. Like, God, I would have had him in just a few more shots. Wouldn't a news chopper have a radio in it, though? That's odd to me that they wouldn't have a radio in this thing. I mean, I don't know what model of helicopter this is exactly, but that's kind of strange to me that they wouldn't have any kind of radio built into it. You'd think that would be standard. I mean, maybe nowadays it is. Like, again, I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to ask my uncle. He's the pilot. $20 years in the Navy. He flew around the world. Well, and sailed. Yeah. I like how the inclusion of the cop characters, gives them a good justification for getting to where they're going. It's like they start off this story very early with a good amount of weapons, so you don't have to spend half the movie waiting for them to scrounge up whatever they can find, having to start off being all scrappy, like again like in Night of the Living Dead. I mean, granted, by the second act of Night of the Living Dead, they find the rifle, I believe, relatively quickly. But the whole first act pretty much is just them kind of doing what they can with what they got. But if you had to follow that up in a sequel, I do think it's a smart decision to start the characters off with more ammunition right away, just so you don't feel like you're rehashing too much of the same ground. God, this would have been so surreal to me, seeing a mall parking lot this empty as a kid. Like all the generations after millennials, I am so sorry that you missed out on peak mall culture. Just me growing up in the 90s, man, it's just, God, I miss the mall I used to go to so much. Like, that was so much of my childhood there. And this was back when malls had a good amount of business to them too. It's like, multiple floors, all the stores. There's almost all the stores at any given time. Like, you rarely saw anything that was closed or going out of business. There was almost always something new to see as far as what was being sold in your favorite stores, and people hanging out in the food court. I mean, mall culture was a very real thing, especially in America. Up until probably, I guess it started winding down probably after the I would say the 2000s. Yeah, because when did that Canadian cartoon 16 come out? It's showing my age again, talking about that. Yeah, but yeah, I used to watch that show all the time. Even that one was in a mid 2000s show, back when mall culture was still relevant. Yeah. God, I miss going to the mall so so much. And shit, like, it's so boring being able to buy almost everything online these days. Just people are less motivated than ever to leave their houses. Not that I have much room to talk, the introvert that I am, but going to the mall gave you something to do. You got some exercise, you walked around, and I remember all my favorite stores I would go to. You had Spencer's Gifts, FYE, the video store. I may have talked about all this before, but that's the same stairway from the Zack Snyder film right there, or that little corner or stairwell. But yeah, I used to get all my favorite movies from FYE. They like it because they just sold stuff there that you couldn't find in other stores, or things that weren't in the rental stores like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video yet. And so yeah, I got so many anime movies from FYE. Like, I got pretty much all the Dragon Ball Z movies there. Yeah. If I remember right, there were some dirty movies there too. They had like a section for them in the back that I mean, they covered them up with like metal plates, basically. The like wasn't much protection at all. But I skimmed them every now and then when my folks weren't looking. I'm sure a lot of people did. I like how they give focus to firearm safety in this movie. I can't help thinking of the remake when I see that staircase. Just like, goddamn Steve Marcus. That horde following them up the stairwell, and they stop just when they're just to look at their guns being pointed at them, like they suddenly remember what guns are. Yeah. And I love how Snyder justified that too. It was, as far as why they did that, because it's cool. I mean, to be fair, Romero did some things just because they looked cool too. I mean, I'm sure he thought that exact same way at least once. He wasn't obsessing over every little detail of whether something made sense. Yeah, they cover a lot of the same areas in this mall in the original as what we see in the Zack Snyder version. Both films really do a good job of showing you the anatomy of a mall behind the glamour and what customers are meant to see on the surface. It really feels like its own character. It almost reminds me of Rapture from BioShock a little bit, just in terms of how you see how idyllic it was supposed to look back in its heyday when everyone was, one, alive, but also, walking around not all crazy, killing each other. And you could see kind of a bygone era of what it was supposed to look like. Then we got glimpses of what it looked like at its peak in flashbacks, like, in BioShock 2. Yeah, definitely wouldn't see stuff like that teepee anywhere today. And yeah, just turn this place into a giant blinking light show that'll make a lot of noise and attract more and more zombies to it. God, I swear they do this. The first two films, no, even with the third one, Day of the Dead, just coming down to the same place every time in the chopper, leading the zombies to gather right around where the underground bunker is. It's just I swear, I don't know if Romero thought about this or not back then, but it's just like, God, they do this in every damn movie. Like, they they attract so much attention to themselves. Like, they set themselves up to have a zombie horde just gathered around them, soon enough, because these things are so clearly attracted to noise and light. See, these aren't the kind of zombies that only move when, humans or the presence of humans stimulate them. And, they're spatially aware just enough of their environment that, when this thing has the lights on at night, it's gonna attract all of them around for miles. I don't understand why the human characters keep doing this when it's so blatantly unnecessary to anyone with a half-working brain. I don't know. It's just if I had to nitpick something about an otherwise like fantastic movie, I wish that Romero would have addressed that at some point in his original trilogy, just trying to be a little bit more practical with how the characters make use of light and trying to minimize noise. I could go on, and like I did in, my awful live stream about how that pissed me off with the characters lighting up the farmhouse so much in Night of the Living Dead. Just I mean, you got so many windows in the roof of this mall. You got so many different stores you could hang out in, go to other stores when you need to. And after you clean up the zombies, you just designate certain areas for fun and, turn on the power and music if you want to an extent. Just watch the volume. But then other areas, you would I just don't like how the plot dictates that they have to start acting like idiotic kids in a candy store, or the moment they get into this place, acting like it's their own personal amusement park, and they just completely seem to forget the amount of danger that they're in and how these zombies operate. I don't know. I would never want to even try to remake this movie, let alone try to follow both Romero and Snyder's versions. But if I was crazy enough to try, that's one thing I would definitely address as far as how they live in the mall, is just, really try to just make them think a bit more critically as far as electricity and the amount of noise that they're making. And while still maintaining the appeal, or rather the illusion of appeal, that, living in your own little microcosm of Shopatropolis. It's a shopping metropolis. Just the amount of freedom and joy that it gives you from a consumerism mindset, because the whole spell of this place really does seem to cloud their judgment, at least for the first half of the amount of time that they spend there. And then by the time they come to their senses, or at least, Peter and whatever the other guy's name is. I am so bad at remembering names. It's not even funny. Like, it frustrates me so badly with it, especially with movies that I've already seen, like, at this point, like, dozens of times. See, now it's just kind of jarring to me how, like, they use their brains fairly well when it comes to how they handle the zombies, and yet they just turn into complete morons when it comes to how they manage their lives in the mall. Well, it's like if they had done a better job not attracting attention to themselves, maybe being smarter about where they landed the chopper. I mean, granted, the chopper, you're not unless you have like a tarp, a giant tarp or something that's like tied down on the roof, you're not going to be able to hide that. But at the very least, they might have been able to avoid attracting other human survivors like the motorcycle gang as soon as they did if they had just tried a little bit harder to maintain a low profile while they stayed here, or at least until the area was more secured. If they had managed to stay here long enough to set up a perimeter, maybe establish some barricades in the parking lot, or maybe some road spikes so other people couldn't get here as very easily, then maybe then they could have started living large in the mall at least occasionally while the power grid was still on. I get that people are afraid of the dark and you don't want to live in darkness, but as much shit as there was in this mall, there had to be a store where they could get plenty of candles and batteries for flashlights. Like there's no way they wouldn't have been able to find their way around this place somehow. Even if it's like, in the middle of the night. And even if it was darker in some areas compared to others, again, you don't need the whole mall open to walk around in at night anyway. Hey, like just pick a home base where you'll be coming and going from. And then aside from when you want to go out and just explore for a while, just leave the rest of the mall alone. Gather up the supplies you need. You need to pick one room that you can barricade yourselves in and defend effectively. And just, don't worry about keeping all this other shit on and just almost constantly running. I think that's just such a waste of power. God, poor Steven. It's like, we get it, he's not a cowboy like they are, but it's like you can't even remember to check when the gun is loaded. I don't know. I'm just finding things to pick at, keep the commentary going, try and make it seem like I'm not just blatantly getting sucked into the movie to the point that I'm not even trying to make it entertaining for you. I swear I am. It's just one of those movies, man, where it's like, it's same thing with Jaws. It's like, if I were to do a Jaws commentary, I would have to fight myself to not get just sucked into watching that movie, because it is just so effortlessly immersive in how it just grips you. Yeah, don't make that mistake again. You point a gun at him again, he'll throw you over the side, right over the railing. That one zombie wasn't even moving to come after him. Like, he wasn't even limping, just... I don't know what... I'm sure there's an interview somewhere that talks about this. I don't know what the thought process was behind that hippie monk-looking zombie. I just said, I don't know what... it's definitely a memorable character as far as, like, zombie looks go, but I don't know what that was supposed to... did Romero see someone like that in real life on the street and just figure, hey, let's make someone like that into a zombie? I don't know. Or I think that... I don't think that was even an actor. I think that guy was just hanging around on set or in the area they were filming one day, and I think Romero met him and then he or maybe Tom Savini, I think someone who was on the crew just asked him if he wanted to be in it. I could be completely misremembering thing, but ooh, one of the best kills coming up right here. Yep. Ooh, all that red paint bubbling around that ear. Yeah. That guy became famous, I believe, for being the screwdriver zombie. After this movie started getting attention, it's like everywhere he went, people recognized him for that kill. Kind of like that one guy in Jaws who got just world-renowned recognition, and anytime someone recognized him, and they just walk up to him, ask him to say, "A what?" Like the guy when Hooper says, "Hey, it's a tiger shark." Here, a what? God, of all the things to get famous for, not that I'd complain. Maybe after the 1,000th time I was asked to say it, I'd be a little jaded. But I love the cast in this movie so much. Just the energy they bring to when they go from being serious and scared to being just goofballs. God, could that announcer on the intercom sound a little bit more like a creep? I mean, I get that the audio is distorted on that intercom, but even without that, he sounds like just someone that I would not want to socialize with. Those poor zombie extras just like trying their best to be taken seriously, just like scrunching their noses and lips up against the glass. Good. I swear, it's like Romero himself said that he could. I'm positive he said that he considers this movie to be as much of a comedy or a satire as it is a horror film. People talk so much crap about zombie stories, or zombie media that's impossible to take seriously. And it's like, you really think a lot of people had an easy time taking this shit seriously the first time they saw it? I don't say shit in that it's a shitty movie, but it's like there's plenty of like kind of goofball parts in this film too. Like Zack Snyder's film played it more straight and serious than this version did, in terms of just how melancholy it got. I tell you, another way you can tell it's not 1968 in this movie is the clothes. Honestly, if they wanted to establish a more realistic timeline for this trilogy, that I honestly think that they should have just said at some point in the newsroom opening what year it actually was. I guess maybe you could argue that the ambiguity lends itself better to the timeline, but it's plain to see this is clearly nowhere near the 60s anymore. So it's just like, I know it's nitpicking, but it just keeps coming back into my head. Like, it's a direct follow-up. It's supposed to take place, I'm pretty sure, just weeks, maybe a month after the events of the first film. And it's just that they never explain why everything down to the clothes, it looks so different. I don't know. I guess it's possible maybe Romero would have thought of that back then, but they just didn't have the budget to do anything about it. I don't know. It would, but you can suspend disbelief and just accept it as it is. Ooh, that's one of my favorite stores to go in the original Dead Rising. Once you kill the psychos that are in there, or at least. Yeah. There's a store like that in Resident Evil 2 as well, isn't there? The gun shop, the famous gun shop that Claire Redfield gets her some of her guns from, and the holsters. I can't believe I'm blanking on another frickin' name. I know the name of this store. God, as much exposure as I've had to Resident Evil over the years. Oh no. It would be one of the funniest ways to get killed by a zombie if that one managed to like link his tambourine around like someone's neck or something, like maybe one of the motorcycle gang members just like hula hoops it around them and maybe by accident and then just pulls them in and starts chowing down. God, that would have been funny as all hell. I swear, it's like up until Day of the Dead, it's like the female characters in these movies that just always seem to be so inept in defending themselves against even one zombie. I mean, Barbara got lucky, with the car, or having that to, hide in and at least try to help herself get away from the first zombie in the cemetery. But even then, it's like, up until Patricia Tallman's Barbara in the 1990 remake, I mean, yeah, if you judge strictly by the original trilogy, from 68 to 85, it's just, I don't think there was a single competent female character in these movies. He's at least right away, or within from the second act onward, until like probably the main character, the scientist in A Day of the Dead. Honestly, the more you think about it, it didn't make a lot of sense that they're the only people who found this mall. It's like I'm paraphrasing from like Max Brooks, the Zombie Survival Guide. But great read, by the way. God, I read that thing cover to cover multiple times as a kid. It's like, if the zombie apocalypse ever does happen and it's even remotely close to Romero zombies, like that is going to be the book that you want to get. The copies of that book are going to be as precious as Bibles. He'll say, I promise you. But I just, you want to read good stuff like related to zombies. Read Max Brooks, just the Zombie Survival Guide and the World War Z book. It just better than the Brad Pitt movie in every conceivable way by a wide margin, in my opinion. And I wish someone would do not a remake, but a readaptation of the book that actually tries to, adapt the book. But come anywhere near my as yet undefined romantic partner with a hanger, and you and I are going to have some problems. I mean, I know I stuck a gun in your face, but be reasonable, man. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I mean, hate to be crude, but unfortunately, that is that was not an uncommon thing at one point in time. As far as procedures of that nature with pregnancy being done with hangers. God, that's a horror movie in itself. I think the first time I learned about that even being a thing was in The Fly. When Gina Davis's character, or talks about it in the the David Cronenberg version with Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum. Yep. It's always such a riot to see how you manage to fuck it up. Because some of them don't even look like the blue makeup goes like below the top of their neck. I do like how as far back as like all the way back in Night of the Living Dead, like it was established that these zombies could gradually learn and not just remember things from when they were alive, but like that they could pick up on things over time. I mean, they didn't get in that. They didn't get into that as like a major plot point until Day of the Dead, but all the way back to 1968, you could see little hints that something along those lines may have been starting in them. I love this guy in the eye patch so much. I don't even know why he's wearing the eye patch or what. Maybe they thought that would make him look more interesting as a character. I don't know. I don't care. Or this movie would not be as great as it is without him. Yeah. That's another detail I always loved is even though Romero left it ambiguous as to what the cause of the reanimation actually is, that he shows scenes like this of, authorities and scientists and so on, and academics discussing this as people realistically would in any kind of, outbreak related situation. Then they try to address it as if it were some kind of biological contagion, and can we try to approach this can we cure it, can we treat it, or vaccinate against it somehow. So there. Hey, why not have flying lessons for everyone while you're at it? Just take turns. Franny in the morning, Peter in the afternoon. God, he had some nice hair in this movie, man. Tell you what, you want to talk about the genetic lottery? He really must have hit it big to get that hair. Yeah, watch me find out in the trivia that it was a piece. Yeah, God. I don't even know how many members of the original cast are still alive. Oh, I love this music too. It makes it feel so much more fun, and like they're really this really rides the line between a horror movie and an action movie at points, as well as the comedic elements. And this is one of those sequences where it really feels much more like an action movie, just in terms of them, taking charge and really, taking the fight to the undead instead of just being defensive. This came out the year after Smokey and the Bandit, I believe. So this would have been so much more relevant. This whole bit that they're doing with it. Yeah, there's still really not that many of them as far as the metrics by which you would measure a zombie horde goes. So, yeah, I mean that right there is maybe about as much as what they were dealing with by the second act of Night of the Living Dead. God, it said the music sounds almost whimsical at this point. I love this movie so much, but it is really hard to take some of these zombies seriously, just with how like normal they look. Okay, it's the lighting as well as the color just really did not do these makeups any favors. It's like you can get used to it, like I said, but it's just some of their expressions are just it's like they didn't know what to do as far as how to make their characters what kind of zombie they wanted to be, because I'm pretty sure Romero didn't have zombie school at this point. He had no set idea for how they should all act or present themselves. So it's like they all kind of end up just having their own character. There's like a very loose set of criteria at this point. I love how he's just going, having the time of his life right now. Roger, that's his name. God, I'm sitting here for over 30 minutes now trying to remember that dude's name. Uh-oh. See, now that one remembers enough to pick that thing up and use it as a weapon, or at least to break the window. Yeah, very much like a callback to the zombie with the rock in Night of the Living Dead Cemetery. Yeah, like I said, just like all the way back then, the seeds were planted for them to start learning, not just remembering. Ew, fingers almost in the mouth. Oh, God. There's no way at least a drop of that didn't get in his mouth. Yeah, bit of an obvious dummy head there too, but it's quick enough that you could still get away with that. Yeah, you can tell at this point like he's getting progressively unhinged. I love his like progression into like that bit of madness as it goes on, even before he gets bitten. This man, we got this by the ass. That's one of the best lines in movie history, right there. At least in horror movie history. I swear, just every musical track in this movie, man, it just, I don't know what it is about this style of sound that they're using. It just makes the tone, just the surrealness that I'm sure I've brought up for like the fourth or fifth time now, but it's yeah, bright red paint. But it just works to sell the eeriness of this situation so well. No, it's just that's one thing a lot of people really don't appreciate about quality media, let alone horror media, is the sound. Oftentimes makes it arguably more so than anything else, anything on screen. I mean, John Carpenter talked about that when he sent the first cut of a Halloween to be reviewed by, I think it was a studio executive or marketer or whatever, and she said tongue twister, that it was the most boring thing she'd ever seen. And then he brings it back to her again or the editor brings it back to her with the music added this time, and it was like a night and day difference. You're gonna run out of ammo before you make a dent in that number of them at this rate. You're getting more and more of them surrounding you. Oh, I love that moment. Until like, get off him, you fucking sons of bitches. Yeah, you really get a sense that like these characters care about each other, and they like not just depend on each other, but they're really getting to feel like kind of a found family dynamic. Yeah, at least one cop's got to stay professional. Yeah, I love how Peter, he's very much like seasons 1 through 2, maybe a little bit of 3. Like before, what happens with Lori, spoilers, but he's very much like early series Rick Grimes, and that he keeps his eye on his eye on the prize, doesn't let his emotions get the better of him very often. And he's like the father figure, I guess, is sort of the patriarch of this particular group. But he doesn't even react like it hurt. He'll just say it like, "Holy shit, did that just happen?" And that one hurt him. Yeah, he definitely felt that one. Does anyone want this gun back? Yep. And then there were 3. Or there soon will be. Jack Daniels, baby. Yeah, he ain't turning blue yet. Reminds me of like the focus on the animal trophy heads in the Evil Dead cabin. They did something similar with the Night of the Living Dead remake too, the 1991, focusing on they had like those close up shots of the animal trophies. Yeah, that music definitely would not fly today. Yeah. I love how he's so experienced at this stuff. He can anticipate what Steven's thinking. Lock and load. Yeah, you might not get away with this music today, but it's a good theme to get you pumped up, I guess. Yeah. I like how they take the time to show them loading all the ammo and like the shells and cartridges in too. Show you how time consuming it actually is to set that stuff up. Yeah, but unless you're dealing with like automatic ammo belts, it's being fed into like a machine gun or something, or an artillery gun, whatever. God, imagine if they sold stuff like that at this mall, then they'd really be almost unstoppable. That is a nice color detail. How like the chunks that they blow out, it's like the blood is still usually like that red paint, but the innards often look kind of like darker blue. almost like to what's the word I'm looking for? Or to juxtapose the decomposition of the flesh with the blood. I don't know. I mean, it may not look realistic per se, but I do think it's it's still a nice detail as far as how to distinguish the blood and from the rest of the wound. Yeah, if they cleared these aisles a little bit more first, then they would have had a much easier time doing that. I love how they're still carrying that over from Night of the Living Dead, like like their fear of fire. It's not quite as front and center this time, but it's like with that, and then also with the flare that Franny had lit up against the monk zombie from before. That's a nice bit of continuity. I don't know if they still were afraid of fire by Day of the Dead, were they? I'm pretty sure by Land of the Dead that they pretty much moved past that. That's it. But I don't remember actually if Day of the Dead was still doing that in any capacity. God, get the man something to use for crutches, or a splint at least. Or I think there's a splint there. Ooh, yeah. Bright red paint or not, that looks like it hurt. Thank you very much, dear. That's so sweet. That little moment of humanity. He tried to show some courtesy to I think that was like a nun, zombie nun. God, I tell you, whatever this mall was like when it was actually a mall, like I don't recognize any of these stores. The businesses here definitely before my time out. I think there was a J.C. Penney's, but aside from that, I don't recognize much of any of these. Not a bad car. Looks similar to a DeLorean. I mean, obviously the doors aren't the same, but yeah, maybe it's the color, just kind of that like metallic frame. Ugh. Yeah, shatterproof assholes. Oh, there you go. Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, as long as you keep this place all lit up and making noise. He's yeah, I'm sure they're not going to lose interest anytime soon. Idiots. Yeah, cell phones were about the size of that brick once upon a time. Thankfully, that was a little before my time. Yeah, but believe it or not, I had no interest in having a cell phone as a kid. It's like so many people, they give iPhones to their kids before they hit puberty these days. I mean, my sister got her first iPad, I think, when she was like 6 or 7, my youngest sister, I mean. And I didn't get my first cell phone until I was in like 9th or 10th grade. And my mom was the one who insisted on me getting one. just because they were so common now for like, at least having one in case of emergency. Hey, this was back when we were still using landlines, but by the time I started high school, they were kind of falling out of fashion. So, yep, I had a little Samsung flip phone. This was back in the days of Nokia, old school Nokia. Box Arco Pitcairn. That's supposed to be a sports team. God, I just love how much attention to detail they put into all the character they give to this mall. It's like I can't tell what stuff was already there and what stuff they added in, after they started shooting. It's just like it's such a fully realized character. I love how Franny's just like covered in holsters. Reminds me of like Grady Hoover carrying all of Earl's ammo and Tremors too. Just stocked up. Ugh. God, it would be so awful being around a place with that many dead bodies. Like, even if you dispose of them properly, it's like there's no way you're going to get to all of them in time before at least some of them start to smell. Once that smell gets into the air, it's like, good luck getting it out quickly. God, poor Roger. He just looks so helpless by the end. Okay. He's kind of like this group's equivalent to the daughter, the little girl who got bitten in a Night of the Living Dead. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, maybe let's change the subject off of whipping for a second. Try and find another way of phrasing it. What do you think? Yeah. That's not even a joke. I'm just saying it's like I don't know if Ken Foray thought of anything like that when they were reading the script for this movie, but I just said it might have gone over a little better if they'd said like whooped. Try to emphasize an O instead of an I, like we whooped them. I don't know. That was just probably just making a mountain out of a molehill with that one. Zombies and hormones. What a wonderful combination. It's a pretty dark humor kind of moment to have that kind of music playing over this. God, imagine how much weight you'd be dragging around on those things. Yeah, I mean, not that I have any firsthand experience with dragon bodies, but I mean, you compare it to manual labor with all the shit I had to haul when I worked retail. I'd imagine, dragging one body's worth of weight would be equivalent to a good few cases of water. Yeah, now imagine having to drag dozens of cases worth of weight. Need to just back and forth, probably for hours, potentially up stairways. Just piling them up like that. And you might not even have a forklift or a dolly to use. God, that would be absolutely dreadful. Eh? World ain't ended just yet. Who knows how much longer the currency's gonna have any value. Gotta save it at least for historical purposes, don't you? Yeah. Gotta imagine if Romero had taken the timeline of his zombie apocalypse all the way into I don't know, to a post-apocalyptic Fallout. Well, then you got people using bottle caps to trade for stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I never could ice skate to save my life. I tried it exactly 2 times that I can recall in over 33 years of life, and not one time was I even able to let go of the rail and stay on my feet for more than a couple seconds at a time. Yeah, the first time I didn't even make it onto the ice at all. I slipped as soon as I stepped on. Just check my phone momentarily. One moment. Gangbusters. God, I would have played the crap out of so many of these arcade games if they'd been around when I was growing up. Yeah, that is a wild image, for a racing game. I wonder how they did that. Hmm. Is that what the J.C. Penney's logo looked like back then, or is that supposed to be a different company altogether? That'd be a big coincidence if it wasn't J.C. Penney's. Yeah. I like how they pay tribute to the Haitian voodoo roots, with zombie mythology, connecting it to Romero's universe here. Yeah, this dialogue was carried over pretty well in in the Snyder version. God, poor Raj. Yeah, this is probably the best deterioration and of gradually getting sicker and eventually dying from a zombie bite since I mean, the only other thing I can think of that comes close is like how they portrayed the deterioration of bite victims in the early seasons of The Walking Dead. And like that one guy who was he lost his family and then he was gradually going crazy, digging all those holes at the top of the hill, freaking the group out, and yeah, he ends up trying to hide his bite for a while, but it gets just impossible to. Even if they hadn't found out, it would have been impossible to hide once his the pain from and fever just started breaking him down. God, he reminds me of that guy, whatever his name was, who played in Stephen King's Thinner, the movie they based off of Thinner. Guy starting to look emaciated. God, it's like he's so delirious, so you almost start to wonder if he's going blind too. Oh, is that a class ring he's wearing? God, he acted his heart out for this scene, man. Got more of a pause there than Christopher Walken. I'm going to try not to come back. I love this dummies. He has no fucks left to give for the masses, man. Illogical hell. God, so much of society in a nutshell. Yep, there he is. I get so engrossed in his performance, and so just trying to stress it like he's explaining to 5-year-olds just how things are now, and it's just he just can't get through to them because it's like the TV guy said, human beings are emotional first, logical second. We always have been, and it's not something you can educate away, unfortunately. Well, I mean, I hesitate even to say unfortunately. You might as well just ask people to stop being human. And if you take emotion out of the equation completely, I think they're both kind of arguing in extremes there. But in between there is the answer that, people are just in these movies just consistently seem to refuse to hear. I mean, you would think that as much zombie media as there is in real life, that we would have a higher likelihood of cooperating if something like this, God forbid, ever did happen. But honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I hate to sound cynical, but I'm an optimist at heart, but I'm also a realist on top of that. And I honestly think the opposite would be the case if something like this happened in the real world. It'll do, like, if anything, I think the abundance of existing zombie media that we just inevitably be comparing to whatever's happening in reality. Like, there's no way we wouldn't. And I think that in several ways that would actually make our response worse. I mean, I hate to say that. I really do think that, we wouldn't respond, as efficiently as we think we would. To be fair, if a more cynical person could argue, how real was it before the world started going to shit? 50% divorce rate and all that. I don't even know if that statistic is still accurate, and I need to double check that. God, you can't even wear it like as a symbolic gesture. Jeez, I just don't want to put labels on it. I'm already pregnant. Let's cut our losses and stick with that. Wonder how likely books on pregnancy would be to sell in a mall. Good. I wanted a typewriter so badly when I was a kid. Like, when I dreamed of working in film as like a screenwriter, and as well as a director. It's just I thought people with typewriters were so badass because it looked so professional. Even after computers came out, I couldn't help thinking that typewriters had more style to them. I don't know. Maybe I'm just old fashioned that way. I mean, I definitely would get so frustrated trying to get the hang of using one now just because I don't type like that. But I can type pretty steadily, but I was never very good even in school at traditional, keyboarding. Drop it off at the drugstore. Imagine if they were all sleeping together in the same bed. Just good night, Stephen. Good night, Franny. Good night, Peter. Good night, John Boy. For those of you who got that reference, congratulations. You are feeling your mortality as much as I am. I like how many different dawns they show in this movie. It keeps a recurring theme of that in relation to just the visual of this is the dawn of a new era. The time of humanity is, as we knew it, is nearing its end. And it's even though it's dawn, it feels. This sounds paradoxical a little bit, but to me, I think you could interpret it almost as this is the last dawn you'll ever see of the world you knew. It's like you had the night that the dead first started reanimating, they're coming out of the darkness, emerging as a very real, visible threat. And now here in this movie, they're out all the time in broad daylight. They don't even focus as much on the nighttime action now. Most of this movie is in the daytime. It's one of the best examples of horror in daylight that I think you could ever make, because there's no safety or sense of relief to be had from the daytime anymore. They don't work like vampires, and it's just every time they show another shot of the morning, the dawn coming, and it's like, to me, I interpret that as, is this the last dawn that we're going to see of human civilization? Before all the dawns after that, there's just nothing left but the dead. Like, nothing's moving but the dead, nothing for miles around all the way to the horizon but the dead. She's got a real Marilyn Monroe meets Bonnie and Clyde thing going on there. Sheesh. Going full on Harley Quinn there. Almost 20 years before Harley Quinn became a thing. It sucks so much that there was a time when, we put pressure on women to doll themselves up that much. It's like to that heavy of a degree. It makes me think back to like makeup standards in the Victorian or Elizabethan era. I don't know. Might be a generational thing, but I personally like always end up kind of linking it in my brain to mimes when I see styles of makeup like that. Like not just clowns, but mimes specifically. Yeah, which are different. I know. Don't come after me, art. I get it. It's but God, Marvel zombies and DC zombies are bad enough. You deal with a zombified Art the Clown, just forget about it. I mean, that'd be kind of redundant in his case. You see this scene in like so many movies, so that like it Brokeback Mountain, and it's like they keep switching the TV on and off until Jake Gyllenhaal is like, "You sit down, son of a bitch." It's just. He really takes his time too, just like establishing dominance. God, that line hit me so hard in the feels the first time I heard it. Just what have we done to ourselves? It's not subtle, but then again, the Snyder version wasn't either. You compare it to Kenneth saying that there's some things worse than death, and one of them is sitting here waiting to die. Yeah, it really kind of introduces a new problem psychologically compared to Night of the Living Dead, where with that first film, everyone was focused on just making it through the night. They weren't even thinking about, let's say we successfully barricade and secure this place, and what if we hypothetically had everything, well, most everything we could possibly need. Then the next problem becomes, what then? How do we keep this from going from a refuge to a prison? Tom Savini, everybody. Baby Tommy Savini. That is one of the most iconic combs in just the history of media, just that mustache comb. I imagine so many people went out and bought that comb after they saw this movie. Dude from Hogan's Heroes on his radio here. One dude there got a saber. Nice. Yeah, you think you got guns? You think you got the juice? We got the juice. All those greaser jackets, all they need now is to start to just snapping and like to the music as they just waltz their way into the mall. Yeah, this has to be one of the most iconic movies for biker culture, like right up there with the Mad Max films. Yeah, just like I can only imagine that the bad rap bikers must have gotten, and partially as a result of depictions in media like this. See, this is where road spikes might have been useful. Yeah. That was smart editing, by the way, how they used the cover of night to like instead of having to show all the zombies on screen alongside them, it's like they use the cover of darkness to kind of they tell you there's hundreds of them, but I don't know if they had that many realistically in terms of how many people they actually had playing the zombies, but it's a nice way to preserve the illusion that there would be that many. You show as many as you can close to the camera, like here, but then you just imply that the rest of them are off in the dark somewhere. Or that, yeah, for low budget horror, or that's definitely a clever editing choice. Yeah, he spent less time playing around in the mall. Maybe you would have had more time to work on improving your defenses. I mean, again, I'm not saying I would make every right decision in a life or death scenario either. Like I said, it's like nobody makes all the right choices 100% of the time, but it seems like some of these mistakes were so easily preventable. I don't know. I like how careful they are with the choreography here, like acting like they're being rough with them, but taking care not to, as far as I can tell, not to actually injure any of them. Oh yeah, of course that one guy had to have a sombrero, didn't he? Yep, we're in the end game now. Oh, that is an awesome bike. So many good-looking bikes there. Hey, he said it. He said it. Zombies. Yeah, Romero never called him that in Night of the Living Dead, but hard to miss it in this movie. I think that's the only time they say the word zombie in the original trilogy. Even then, I don't think it caught on at that point yet in terms of being synonymous with this kind of monster. I mean, maybe it's possible that at the time that was written in the script. I'd have to listen to George Romero's director's commentary on this movie. But for all I know, that was just put in there as a reference to Peter's background with his dad, his Haitian heritage, Trinidad or wherever he said it was. Yeah, a lot easier to maneuver around than a car, isn't it? On the inside of this place. Jeez, there's enough for everybody, people. There's enough mall to go around. Yeah, I get that nice wide shot with her legs open. Had to get that, didn't you? God, just shamelessly, absolutely disgustingly shameless in their looting. Yes. Having a gay old time. Yes, there was a time when people said that and it had no relation to homosexuality, believe it or not. Watch the Flintstones. He's getting ready to do something stupid as usual. Left the shirt. And how much of that stuff did you really need? Yeah. Yeah, that dude checking his arm, his blood pressure. God, I don't know what possessed them to work that into the script, but I am so glad that they did because it is freaking hilarious. Hey, the cavalry's here. Just not for you. Yeah, I'm sure. You ever get tired of being wrong? On top of the war you were already fighting. Yeah, that's how it is with most zombie fiction. Like it's rarely ever just one war. It's always like twofold. There's the living versus the dead, and then the living versus the living. That is such a slick effect. I think to especially, I cannot imagine how people in 1978 reacted to seeing that the first time. Yeah, it's just some movies, man, that just you wish you could go back in time for like one day with no chance of affecting the timeline, and just maybe just be invisible. Nobody even sees you, and you just go back to a certain era for one day to a specific event, and you just sit down in a, let's say in a theater or with a whole audience and just watch their reactions to seeing iconic movies for the first time. Good. Yeah. I mean, I still remember what a roller coaster it was for me seeing Star Wars in theaters for the first time. You know, for me, my first Star Wars film, like I said, was the Phantom Menace. I believe I mentioned that on the podcast, but I just met my stepdad. Then my current stepdad was lucky enough to have seen the original trilogy in theaters. Him and his brother, they snuck in to see it so many times. Names all three of them. So do they even have enough room in their vehicles for all this shit they're trying to take with them? And it's like, what are they planning to do with all this stuff? Keep it, sell it, wear it? I don't. Take some VHSs with you. A few VCRs. Did they have those in 1978? No, I don't think they had that yet. Never mind. I don't think they did. Yeah, God, so much of the Romero trilogy just would not have been possible without Tom Savini. I mean, everyone in the makeup department, I'm sure, contributed it a lot. It's but yeah, Savini, man, he just his effects work really just makes these movies. Just, he just smacks it with his sword. Peter. No, I don't have the vocal range to even come close to imitating the best Lois Griffin Peter scream of all time. Yeah, I love how much use they make of the environment and throughout this movie, like especially in the fight sequences, just transitioning from the floor to the stairs to the elevator, and the innards of the elevator shaft. Just this whole oh god, you feel it when with those hits. God, just struggling not to scream. God, I don't know what it is. Like even compared to Night of the Living Dead, just the zombies for so much of this movie are just like pathetic in terms of their fighting ability. Woo! Yep. See you in Land of the Dead. That was one of my favorite cameos in that movie. Is like that Tom Savini's like not just Tom Savini, he playing another zombie, but the exact same zombie that he was in this movie, coming back all those years later. Yeah, and somehow he's not rotted all the way down to a skeleton. Just Yeah, they mowed down a good amount of them. Boom, baby. Ain't so tough without your bikes now, are you? Yeah, now the horde's finally starting to become a threat. I don't know why they kept going back to that blood pressure gag. It's so funny, but it makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. Back in the shaft. Shaft. Anybody remember that movie, Shaft? And yeah, surprise, surprise. Had needed to know your blood pressure that badly? He's that is some of the fakest screaming. They for 1978, with what they had to work with, those are pretty decent guts. Yeah, a lot more realistic than anything I could work with. As far as what you find in a Halloween store. Yeah, they got some. That's the good shit that like only real meat will get you. Butcher shop stuff. Ugh. Yeah, you might have to send the substitute teacher in because it looks like the professor is going to be late to class. I'm sure someone out there did just mockingly started imitating the CSI Miami theme song right then. It's just so stupid. Come on. Brave last stand. Let's do it. Yep. That last bite to the neck. That's what did him in. Yeah, but he fought to the bitter end. Ugh. I may be remembering another movie, but is there a cut of this film that shows him, Steven, trying to shoot himself, but there's like he's out of ammo or something thing when he tries, and then he blacks out, and that's when they cut to the elevator reopening, and he's a zombie. God, I don't know if there's any cut of the film that has that. I might be thinking of something else. Yep, gotta have the big chow down scene. One thing all these movies have in common. one of the Somehow one of the most timeless and stupid gags in horror history right there. She sure loved him a lot. It's one thing that kind of gets me about their relationship in this movie is like it feels like they were never really like a ride or die kind of couple. Well, they were kind of just together out of convenience, and then surprise, she's pregnant. Now things are more serious, but that is one thing I prefer the remake for. Oh my god, that is the best zombie face in the entire movie. And the way it's perfectly timed with the music distorting. His whole act, just the look, the limp, the whole way he pulls it off so much better than any of the other zombies in this movie. It's just an incredible the way he came up with whatever made him think to do all of that. Just he's really got down the rigor mortis that you kind of expect now from how traditional zombies move. Yep. And his memory's still working too. God, that must have given him such a headache, like angling his eyes that way for prolonged periods of time. Yep. Doing in death exactly what Peter warned him not to do in life. Ugh. Bit of a design flaw with how they hid that staircase, as far as the doorway. But can't zombie proof everything. Oh yeah, leave her all alone with her baby. That's great. Okay, and you think she wants to go off in the chopper on her own to give birth on her own wherever she ends up going? Jeez, I don't know what they were thinking with that part of the script. I mean, I do remember at one point there's a version of the ending where she ends up deciding she doesn't want to go either, and it's like she looks at the fuel gauge, I think, and then she looks at the zombies coming, and she kind of weighs her options over, like, how far am I going to get if I take off like this? And in that version of the ending, she ends up just sticking her head up into the rotors, just giving up. But I think Romero said that test audiences reacted so negatively to that ending because it was just so bleak. It was even bleaker than Night of the Living Dead's finale because this was a pregnant woman. And so he ended up changing it to a more, the more rousing, lighter ending thing that we're familiar with now. Oh, and I actually kind of like that as the trilogy goes on. It's like it starts off very melancholy, and then in Dawn of the Dead, they give you just a hint of hope to hold on to for them. And then by the ending of Day of the Dead, that feels like the closest thing to a happy ending that we're going to get for a story like this. And so it is kind of nice that even though the apocalypse, as far as the threat of it, got worse and worse over time, the amount of hope that the audience has to hold on to for the heroes is actually increased over the course of the movies. At least that's how I interpret it. That little pea shooter there. No, that'd be enough, though. Right up against your skull. Yep, this right here is just about where the original ending would have cut to. There's the dawn. And right here is where they changed it. Yep. Screw this, man. I ain't going out like this. Yeah, I got the big hero music going. Open up a whole can of whoop ass. Family size. I'm just fighting the urge to like keep the commentary going while I'm watching this, because just like this ending just gets me every time. Yeah, it's like if you know the history of the, oh my god, this is so funny. Just leave the gun, both guns. But it's just like you get like such a tonal shift from where the ending was almost about to go to the super dark original version, and then all of a sudden just bam, hero time. It's just like, all right, yeah, wait, you wanted this audience, okay? We'll give it that good old college try. Oh, that is a perfect ending shot. Just like the dawn coming up through the clouds, the sunbeams with like the zombies watching them go off into the distance. God, just the camera work, it was just incredible for some of the shots in this film, just to really capture the scope of it. I personally think that them taking off in the chopper at night, like they did towards the beginning of the movie, that's a perfect juxtaposition into them taking off at the end when the dawn's coming in. Yeah, I mean, you can interpret that in a number of different ways, but yeah, I think visually that's a perfect kind of duality to transition from, this is the end of Night of the Living Dead, now we're going into the dawn. And then of course, the last dawn, and like I said before, is this the last dawn that humanity ever sees? And now it's the first dawn for the world of the dead. Now this leads us perfectly into setting up Day of the Dead, both tonally and thematically. So you kind of just leave the mall here as this last bastion of what civilization was, or kind of reflecting not just consumerism, but just sort of letting it stand as a monument to what humans built. And now it's just a big old tomb now. So you go into Day of the Dead, and at that point, all you have left is ruins, like dead places, dead cities, and you got the underground bunker. The whole surface pretty much looks dead. So this is the last time in the timeline that we see a place that, until the end of the movie, looked very much like it could still be alive, if it were still relatively new. But yeah, so that's my commentary for Dawn of the Dead. Hope I was able to keep your interest just enough that you didn't fall asleep. If you did, then hey, I hope you slept well. But I'll definitely do more commentaries in the future. I want to get more people on to record with me. It's just it feels like such a bore doing this by myself. It just in terms of trying to keep interesting stuff, talking about interesting stuff while watching these movies. I don't know what movie I'm going to do next, but we will definitely come up with something. I think it might move on to Day of the Dead. I don't know yet. So yeah, I'm not going to go in any particular order that I have planned out. We'll just have to see what happens. And in the meantime, again, if you're listening to this part of the commentary, then that means you have gone to Patreon and unlocked the full thing uninterrupted. It is so. Thank you very much. Again, appreciate everyone who donates to our Patreon. And until we talk again, and this is Keith Harris from Horror Convos saying good night and be well.